Morning, Dom. How are you?
Good morning, Sebastian. I'm well, thank you.
Very good. Welcome to Cryptonut's podcast number 3. We're on a bit of a roll this week, and I thought we've got some more content, and we'll just put together a little podcast. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the term globalism. There was a bit of a positive commentary on our last video when we were talking about unbanking or banking the unbanked, and we're talking about decentralised banking and centralised banking. I think there's a lot of negativity around corporate structures and banks and centralisation. There's also the term globalism, and I have this feeling that it is being misused in a lot of ways. And there was a comment on our YouTube in pro-globalism or globalists, and I had to think about what that actually meant. Was it a positive term? Was it a negative term? I couldn't quite work that out from the actual comment because it was only a one-liner. So I thought I just thought I'd share with you my personal beliefs on globalism, and especially now that the crypto space and blockchain has started to take over my life a little bit, and how I sort of see that moving forward as part of the big picture. Personally, I think globalism, like I said, has been used a little bit negatively in the sense that I think when people talk about globalism, they think about one world government or a communist control mechanism, and I think that's why people, really push away the thought of one world governments or the new world order or the biometric systems where everything is taken away from us and is put into the hands of a few. But personally, I think globalism is about unity, and I can really see a lot of positives to the term globalism, or the unification of the world, not necessarily from a nation and government point of view, but from a humanitarian point of view. The ability for us to communicate through the internet has been probably one of the greatest inventions of all time, and it's been, only 10, 15 years of our lifetime. Pre-2000, we were still using very clunky mobile phones, and I don't think we even had the internet. We didn't have that luxury. So I've written a couple of things down on a piece of paper here, and I just wanted to run through it, Dom. I will give you a chance to speak, but this is just an opportunity to express how I feel about globalism and where I fit in. And the thing is, I do support a global banking system. However, I don't support centralisation and corruption. So we were talking about BAB, and we're talking about some of the new blockchain platforms that are coming out and applications that are going to enable and empower unbanked people to have the opportunity to obtain leverage from people like ourselves through a peer-to-peer platform and application. And if that's going to encourage innovation, better living standards, and obviously grow economies in places where people choose to have those greater opportunities, I see that as a positive. Again, from history shows that banking hasn't necessarily been a positive thing. There's been a lot of corruption. You mentioned that yesterday, and especially in Australia. We know that it's happening around the world. So I can see that the global banking system is a positive, but as long as it's in a decentralised manner of some sort, putting the power back into our own hands. The other one is I do support community management. However, I don't support government or corporatised government agencies. So I am a little bit of an anarchist in the sense that I like to believe that self-ownership and voluntary societies can be formed. I think having consensual contractual agreements. If you and I were going to engage in services of some sort, I believe in a contract. I don't believe in social contracts in that sense. I don't have the right to vote on behalf of your choice. That's why I was very against the gay marriage. What was it? It was an agenda here in Australia. It wasn't actually against the gay marriage or the ability for someone to marry someone they love. What I was against was the fact that it was put out as a perceived vote or a survey. I don't have that right. I don't have the right to make a decision on where or what you want to do with your life. So that's why I don't necessarily believe in social contracts or contracts or democracies in that sense, because if I don't have that right to do that, then it obviously brings that whole system into refute. I do support border protection and legitimate process. However, I don't support war, manipulation and geopolitical efforts to create unsafe borders. And I think we've had a lot of issues here with refugees, boat people, all of these terms and what would you call them, tags that we've had to put up with from our government. There's no doubt, I think there's a legitimate process for people to come into the country, but really what we should be looking at is the origins and saying, well, these people shouldn't even have to leave their countries. We should be able to encourage greater living standards around the world. And this comes back to globalism as well. If you and I can contribute and create mechanisms that are going to provide greater standards of living for people who don't have the same luxury as us, then that has to be a positive. And I'm all for that. So yes, I am a globalist when it brings greater conditions for other humans. What else did I want to cover? I think we live in the age of the internet, and that has no borders, and we have the ability to communicate with anyone, share and inspire from anywhere in the world. And my goal is just to be able to do that. I want to be able to inspire and share, and that's what we're doing in these particular podcasts, is being able to express ourselves in a greater way. And if someone gets something from that and they can actually put that forward to their environment and to their community, then that has to be a positive. So you could almost say that those parts of that, or those values also align with the globalist ideology. But again, as long as it's not put into the hands of the corrupt, then it has to be a positive. So we have to talk about both sides of what globalism means. What's your take on globalism, Don? Are you a globalist? Are you a globalist?
When you first said we were globalists, I had to think about that also, because I didn't know whether that was a positive or a negative term. It's a negative term if you believe in the one world order system, or you believe that one country is going to dominate all the other countries and become a policeman. I'm mentioning no names. I'm against control. I'm against any society that imposes physical violence on another society to achieve its goals. I believe that every human being has a right to live to their full potential. Now, obviously, today we live in a very unbalanced world. And I think the word globalism, for me, is to bring a level of civilized comfort and security to everyone, so that they don't have to starve, they don't have to be structured in a way that is contrary to human dignity or anything else like that. So the moment you have human beings in charge of something, something's going to go wrong. And that's why I think blockchain, what I make a transfer, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, or anything else, I don't trust an individual to make sure that happens. I've initiated a transaction, and the blockchain carries that instruction out, and you get the money at your end. The blockchain is not partial to your political agenda or your social standing. It treats us both equal. And when we were talking about banking the unbanked yesterday, we weren't trying to shill a particular coin, so to speak. We were trying to shill a concept of making everybody equal in each other's eyes. And that's really what we're trying to do. Communism in principle is that, but it becomes a dictatorship. And if you step out of line, you get punished. So the moment physical violence is brought into the picture, or manipulation, or social engineering, and all these things, we are beginning to become more sophisticated, and we should look above that. The whole marketing machinery is designed to make sure that we spend future income for something that we want today. And that precipitates debt, and we become slaves to debt. And because of that, we are easily manipulated. You look at people in Africa or in third world countries, their daily struggle to survive is the big issue. That's what they're concerned about. What I'm saying is that globalism should smooth out these issues, and there should be a fairer way of distributing wealth and resources, which we haven't got today.
Yeah.
I don't believe that 90% of the wealth of the world is in the hands of 4% of the human population. Doesn't make sense to me. We should move on from that. How are we going to achieve that is by social commentary, what we are doing, and to a degree in thinking about what we say.
It's about having a conversation. It's about having the ability and the desire to actually talk about subjects that make us uncomfortable. And I think that's the big thing. We talked about trolling, and there's a lot of people who tend to complain a lot. They tend to always whinge about what's not happening. You can say, well, government's against me, everyone's out to get me, and all of these type of things. But if you're not having the conversation and you're not contributing in your own space, whether you're a globalist or you're an anarchist or whatever label you want to give yourself, I think that the greatest thing that we can do as individuals is actually talk about what we need to do to help other people and bring them forward. Not everything's about money and your own position in life. So if someone wants to call me a globalist because I care about how other people are living, then go for it. Then that's what I am. Do I support a monarchy-based government structure which is controlled by a select few? Absolutely not. I would run away from that big time. So really, it's about the unification. Whether that means Venus, project origins, and the intent behind the project, but it's like creating a utopia. I don't know if that's necessarily possible. I think there's always going to be an ebb and flow of duality, positive and negative, in everything we do. But if we can increase the level of human consciousness across the world, and I think that's happened since the internet has been able to provide so much more information readily to us. We can go and research. For those who are diligent enough to want to sit there and research topics that might challenge their belief systems, I think that's the big thing. Conspiracy theorists always cop the rough end of the stick, but they tend to be the critical thinkers, the ones that actually go and read and dive into information a little bit more. And I suppose there's a lot of procrastination, a lot of laziness in that respect, and people do make opinions before they go and ascertain information for themselves. I think you were talking about having an experience where some people had a perception of a particular race or a cultural background based on their environmental factors, whether that's the media or the newspapers. We see it here in Australia. There's no doubt it happens in other countries. So it's all part of that social engineering. So again, I just wanted to talk about being an advocate for globalism, but against the control mechanism of one world governments. I think they're very separate subjects, and I think people should be talking about globalism from a humanitarian point of view, and moving away and just finding ways that they can contribute to the greater good. But it does come back to self. We have to take that control. And that's why we talked about blockchain and decentralisation. That was the other term. There's the centralisation. We did talk about BAB yesterday being centralised. There are some centralised entities in the blockchain space. That's because they're a company, they're having a go, they're giving it a crack in a capitalist society, creating an application that they feel is going to benefit society, and then we've got to make decisions whether or not we want to invest into that structure. When you look at things like EOS, which has got a witness-based, decentralised protocol, it can create a sense of chaos. Or maybe things take a little bit longer because there's no central authority to make maybe a decision or as fast as we want. So I think, again, there's positives and negatives to this, and it's up to us to ascertain what we want to participate in. What's your take on decentralisation and centralisation in blockchain? What's positive and negative?
I think it comes back to trust again. I think the moment you go into blockchain, it's a trustless system, not in the sense that you don't trust it, but it doesn't rely on trust to do the things it says it's going to do. It's automatically done, which makes you trust the system. Now, blockchain has really blown everyone's heads because this system works by itself. It doesn't need third-party involvement. Yes, you do need mining, you do need a global ledger, but that's just a verification of the transaction that you want to achieve. Now, you take this further and you start looking at all the other blockchain systems that are coming up, monitoring production, distribution, scanning, infrared microchips, so whatever it is that these systems are coming through on the blockchain, proves that we don't need a governing body to work efficiently. In fact, the more governance is taken out of that in a human sense, the more reliable the system becomes. So I see this as really the thin edge of the wedge in terms of how we perceive things. We like someone in charge to tell us what we do because that's the way we've been socially engineered. Correct. That is going to change, I think. I think we're going to be more reliant on doing a physical transaction to you via blockchain than it is going down to the bank and having a run on the bank and possibly something going wrong. I think the people in Greece don't rely on the banks.
Yeah.
They've gone back to the bartering system because they can't rely on the banks. If they have blockchain, you don't need the banks. So the moment you have a centralized human-run organization which derives the benefits from sheer power, you automatically include a problem of potential corruption. Remove that away, you remove corruption. And once you remove corruption, you've got the purest form of transaction there is, and that is peer-to-peer. And consensus will ultimately prevail. That is true democracy, not the pseudo-democracy that we have where we give an option of chicken or fish, and that's it. We don't. That is not democracy.
Yeah,
so globalism will eventually be driven by the people being more educated and having the facilities to bring these things into play.
Yeah. Your wife's going to answer that.
My wife will get it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that our society is built on a perception of authority, so it's been taught, and the legitimacy of government has been through welfare states, through fear-mongering, through the media. Anyone that wants to dismiss that is probably not at a level of awareness yet. I don't want to put people down who are not quite as awake as others. That term does get put out there. I think as you get older, you tend to see these things for what they are. But there's no doubt when we talk about decentralisation, we talk about things like EOS where it comes down to a consensus. If we can remove the platforms that support corruption, such as governments, such as lobbying, anywhere where there's illegitimate financial reward for opinion, these type of things, what's going to happen is we can actually move towards a community-driven, voluntary, consensual society of greater, higher awareness and collective consciousness. That's what I believe. If people keep talking about it, visualize it, and demand it. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this video, because, being called a globalist in it may be possibly a negative connotation. I just wanted to make it very, very clear that I'm all for self-ownership and decentralisation in its purest form. I think in blockchain we're going to see both. You were talking earlier about China. I don't think there's a lot of negative things about China. I like Chinese people. I think it's an amazing country. However, I think there's going to be a level of internal control. We've talked about Neo and ontology, and I think we're going to do a separate video on the platforms next. I know you've got some great content in regards to that, and we can actually talk about the difference between what China is doing and, say, what an EOS is doing, and maybe some of the other ones that we've researched and how that's going to relate to globalism. We want to talk about new world orders and one world governments, or you want to talk about a decentralized community consensus. I mean, there's I think it's going to be duality. I think it's going to be both. Really, it's going to come down to education and choice. Just as Neo said in The Matrix to Agent Smith, he chooses, and then obviously Agent Smith self-destructs the matrix from within, and it all came down to the choice. I can't dictate your choices, Dom, and you can't dictate mine. All we can do is share how we feel about these things. So I think that's really good. As people can see, Dom, you probably can't see it, but there's a little timer here on the screen. Now we're going to use that moving forward today. I didn't want to press play because I knew that I wanted to have this open-ended conversation. I didn't know how long it was actually going to go for. But what we're going to do is we're going to time limit some of our discussions to say 10, 15, whatever's on the clock, just to keep these rolling and keep them moving. It also allows our viewers to get an understanding how long these videos are going to go. And we might be able to tighten up on some of our content. Again, if the timer goes and we're in the groove and we feel that our content is pretty good, then we'll keep the conversation going. Otherwise, we'll just wrap it up. You're all in for that, eh, Dom?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Can I just have a closing comment?
Go for it.
The closing comment that I see is that the development of the human species right now, civilization, has got to the point where it's a tipping point. You can see this in this distrust of governments and the anarchy that seems to be going on around the world. I would say that everybody should be more critical of the perceived status quo. We should not see people as groups that have to be feared, but have to see them for what we are. We're all humans trying to do the best for our society. Intrinsically, we're tribal by nature. We gravitate to a football club or to a society or to those things. And the royal family are doing this. To look at things, not that I'm for the royal family, by the way. It's just a comment that I'm making, that they're actually trying to keep up with the times. We have to really contribute, and each and every one of us can contribute to the changes that we all see as fair. And that's the bottom line from what I can.
And I think that's the key word, is contribution. So self-empowerment, education, contribution, and action are things that I really believe in. We can't sit there and just whinge about everything and expect things to change. And that's what blockchain is. You've got to get involved, be a part of it. And you did mention a little, and I did write it down, just a little quote. All waterfalls all start with one drop of water. And I think all great ideas do start with one drop. It becomes a concept, it becomes a thought, then someone writes it down, and then it becomes and manifests into something greater. If people don't want a one world government, globalist, communist society, then we have to, as individuals, do what we need to do to make sure that we create the opposite. And I think human nature will naturally create the opposite. It's only the people who demand power and manipulation through the media, and we know who they are. And it's at the government. There's some really shit people in the wrong places, and they've created a system over the last 1,000 years that has got us to where we are. And we've got the greatest opportunity in our lifetime to be a part of a new world, or a new humanitarian, globalist, global society based on consensual, voluntary, contractual agreements, events. And I think that's the power of blockchain. That's why I'm excited about blockchain. So, thanks, Tom. I'm going to leave it there, and
thank you.
Yeah, we're going to do another video very, very soon on blockchain platforms. So hopefully everyone got some value out of that, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, mate.
Okay. Cheers.